U.S. sanctions on Iran are back, and they're bigger and bolder. Washington has not just reinstated all penalties in place before the 2015 nuclear deal. The Trump administration has also put an additional 300 Iranian entities and individuals on its blacklist. That brings the total to 900. Washington has also warned of repercussions should anyone continue to trade with Tehran. Only 8 countries will be allowed to temporarily continue buying Iranian oil. Among them are Turkey, India, and the biggest importer, China. Oil prices fell on the news that OPEC's third biggest exporter could linger in the market for a while more. But investors were also cautious about a defiant Iran.
We have been selling our oil and will continue to sell it under all circumstances. We have the power to do that. They say that Iran bypasses the sanctions. Yes, we announce it proudly that we bypass your illegal and oppressive sanctions.
Another sector at risk of being crippled is banking and finance. Global payments network SWIFT resisted the U.S. decision to reimpose sanctions in August, saying it would only follow EU directives. But on Monday, the Brussels-based company said it would suspend some Iranian banks from its financial messaging service. While SWIFT's decision may help avert a transatlantic tussle, it would cut off Iran's main financial channel to the outside world. SWIFT connects 11,000 financial institutions in more than 200 countries. It allows Iran to be paid for its exports as well as pay for imports. It makes more than 30 million financial transactions a day, which opens up a way for companies to invest in Iran. If it's forced to abandon SWIFT's system, those investments would drop significantly. Iranian businesses will also have to revert to an old, barter-style, unregulated banking system. But the U.S. is not backing down from what it calls maximum pressure to muscle Iran into abandoning its nuclear program.
We are making it abundantly clear to the Iranian regime that they will face mounting financial isolation until they fundamentally change their destabilizing behavior.
But so far, Iran is showing it's willing to take on more sanctions, even if it means being cut off from the world once again. Laila Humairah, TRT World.
Well, for more on this story, let's bring in Ellen Wald from Jacksonville, Florida. She's the president of energy consulting firm Transversal Consulting. We also have Ryan Costello joining us from Washington, D.C. He's the policy director at the National Iranian American Council. Welcome to you both. Ryan, if I could start with you. The US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Iran must act like a normal country or see its economy crumble, accusing Tehran of using the profits of lifted sanctions for funding cyber attacks, missile tests and terror organizations in the Middle East. I'm wondering, do you think Iran has a case to answer?
Look, I think what we're seeing here is a clear double standard from the United States with regard to its position in the region, where Iran is being punished for a range of activities, including on its nuclear program, when it came to the table and it negotiated with the prior administration, with other members of the UN Security Council, to reduce international concerns on its nuclear program. You contrast that with the approach to Saudi Arabia, which has just conducted a murder of a journalist based at the Washington Post with absolutely really zero real consequences for its behavior. That's because the administration is relying on Saudi Arabia to pressure Iran to continue to pump more oil to offset Iranian oil coming off the market. So it's definitely clear that Iran does have issues to contend with that are counter to U.S. interests. But really what the administration has done here is thrown out the successful playbook of diplomacy and pursue a path that I think leads to regime change or war.
Ellen, you've literally written the book on the Saudi oil industry. I'm wondering, to Ryan's point, do you think Saudi Arabia will be the big winner out of all this if Iranian crude is effectively taken off the market?
Well, one of the interesting things that we've seen is that today Aramco lowered its prices for oil going to Asia. And I'm not surprised to see them do that, just as the U.S. has issued exemptions for several Asian countries to continue importing Iranian oil. It's clear that the Saudis still see a need to have to compete with Iranian oil on that market. When it comes to being a big winner of these sanctions, I also wouldn't be surprised if we don't see Saudi Arabia through OPEC deciding that they are going to officially basically keep oil production the same. We're going to be having another OPEC meeting at the beginning of December, so they may see this as a reason not to increase production. On the other hand, though, America is producing now 11.3 million barrels of oil today, so perhaps U.S. producers are really the big winners in all of this.
And Ryan, we know Iran's economy has been hurting even before these sanctions were reimposed. The rial has lost around half its value against the US dollar since April, and that's driven up the price of basic items across the country. Do you think it is worth Iran's while to actually re-enter negotiations with the United States so that its economy doesn't suffer anymore?
Well, I think the U.S. has put them in a position where they, in essence, can't accept a U.S. offer to negotiate on these issues. And the reason for that is because there were negotiations happening as part of the JCPOA through the Joint Commission. They were meeting every few months, and on the sidelines of those negotiations under both the Obama administration and the Trump administration, we saw the U.S. press Iran on issues of concern, including, for example, the issue of detained Americans who are imprisoned in Iran, dual nationals. So, I think if there was a ability to negotiate, the U.S. would have to demonstrate that it could actually abide by its word. Right now, we see the U.S. completely tearing up its word with regard to lifting sanctions that was endorsed by the UN Security Council through Resolution 2231, which supported the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. So I think what the U.S. needs to do is demonstrate first that it's interested in negotiations and not a pathway to war or confrontation.
Ellen, in the lead up to these sanctions, we saw oil prices fluctuate, trying to figure out whether or not supply would be cut off from Iran completely or if the waivers would kick in. So we saw prices go up and down. I'm wondering, do you think the fears of, supplies being strangled as a result of these sanctions, do you think they're justified? Will that happen?
I think that it seems as though big bettors like hedge funds have decided that their fears of $100 barrel oil have been basically alleviated. I think that the move to issue exemptions has definitely helped that. But let's remember, these are temporary exemptions that have been issued for 180 days. And after 180 days, the U.S. could very well pull the ball away and expect these importers to zero out their purchases. And so oil is going to remain volatile, and news of what the U.S. decides to do with these sanctions will continue to impact the market.
And Ryan, you've basically criticized what the Trump administration is doing now. What would you like to see happen out of all this?
What I would like to see is a return to the JCPOA and a resumption of U.S. commitments that it had offered at the negotiating table back in 2015 and begun to implement under the Obama administration. I don't think you're going to see that because the policy is not dictated by somebody who wants to potentially enter into serious negotiations. It's possible that Donald Trump does, want to get some sort of a deal with the Iranians to bolster his credentials as a deal maker. But the policy is being driven by Mike Pompeo and John Bolton, who have been very clear about their intentions with respect to Iran before they entered this administration, which is to provoke regime change in Iran or to bomb Iran. And I don't think they've given up on those goals. I think you've seen that with this move today is a desire to drive Iranian oil sales down to zero in order to destabilize the regime and potentially replicate the playbook of 1953 when oil sanctions led, to a CIA coup back in the 50s that installed the Shah regime back in power. So I don't think that there are going to be serious negotiations under this administration. I'd like to be proven wrong, but it would probably have to require a change in personnel in order to have that happen.
And that might happen as the midterms take place in a couple of days. Well, Ellen Wald in Jacksonville, Florida, and Ryan Costello in Washington, D.C. Thank you to you both.